It was the kind of December night that felt endless, when the sky split open and the rain fell as if the heavens themselves had cracked. The city had been bracing for the storm for days, but no one expected it to grow this violent. Wind howled like a living thing, bending trees, hurling debris, and turning every street into a dark river. By midnight, the power was gone. Lights flickered out one by one, leaving nothing but the angry roar of water and the eerie flashes of lightning slicing through the dark. I had been on duty for 16 hours straight when the call came through. Level 4 flood alert, all rescue units mobilize. It wasn't the first time I'd heard those words, but it never gets easier. I threw on my waterproof gear, grabbed my radio, and met my partner Mark by the trucks. The wind slammed against us as we loaded the small rescue boat onto the flooded street. Our commander's voice crackled through the radio, distorted by static. Sector 7 is critical. Houses submerged. Proceed with caution. Sector 7, the old part of town. Narrow lanes, old brick buildings, and drainage that had never kept up with modern storms. I'd been there dozens of times for smaller emergencies, but tonight felt different. You could smell fear in the air, the way you can smell the sea before a storm hits shore. We pushed the boat into the current, the motor coughing before it roared to life. Rain battered our helmets. Pieces of trash and branches drifted past, fragments of a city drowning. Mark shouted over the wind, "They said the hospital's been evacuated. Streets are gone." "We go where we're needed," I yelled back. We maneuvered between parked cars almost fully underwater. Their headlights glowed faintly beneath the surface, ghostly orbs staring up at us. Every few seconds, the radio hissed with reports. Rescue Team 3 found a family on a rooftop. Team 9 transporting injured civilian. Gas leak reported near 5th Avenue, avoid area. The city we knew had vanished overnight. What replaced it was a maze of water and silence, broken only by the cries for help echoing from balconies and rooftops. Hours passed before dawn even dared to arrive. The rain slowed just enough for the sky to turn from black to bruised gray. By then, my body ached, my fingers numb despite the gloves. Still, we kept going. Every saved life mattered. Every shout answered, reminded me why I joined the rescue team years ago. At around 8 in the morning, we reached a neighborhood that looked almost untouched by time. Low houses, narrow alleyways, the kind of place where people still hung laundry on strings between balconies. But now, those same balconies were half underwater. Floating toys, broken wood, and shattered glass drifted like memories through the water. Mark pointed toward a smaller lane branching off to the right. "That one looks blocked. Want to check it out?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Let's see if anyone's stuck." We turned into the alley. The current was weaker there, but the silence was thick, unsettling. Then I heard it. A faint sound, barely audible at first, carried by the wind. Not a human voice, sharper, smaller. A cry. Mark frowned. "You hear that?" I held up a hand. The sound came again, a tiny, trembling meow. We both froze. It was so out of place amid the destruction, so fragile that it almost didn't seem real. But then it came again, louder this time, desperate and breaking through the sound of dripping water. "Over there," I shouted, pointing toward a collapsed fence half submerged in the flood. We paddled closer. The closer we got, the clearer it became. 2 small shapes clinging to what looked like a floating plank. Tiny, soaked bodies, trembling violently. Kittens. Their fur, if you could still call it that, was plastered flat against their skin. One was ginger, the other gray with faint stripes. They must have been only a few weeks old, barely big enough to stand on their own, and now fighting to stay above freezing water. Mark's voice softened. "Oh God, how long do you think they've been out here?" "Too long," I said quietly. Without thinking, I reached out over the boat's edge. The gray kitten tried to meow, but only managed a faint squeak before slipping from the plank. I lunged and caught it just in time, feeling its tiny claws dig weakly into my glove. The other one didn't even move. It was shaking too hard. Mark leaned over and scooped it up, cradling it inside his jacket. For a moment, the world went silent. Just us, two soaked men, holding two trembling lives in the middle of a drowned street. "We need to get them warm," I said. "There's a vet clinic 3 blocks north. I think they're running emergency care." "Let's move." We wrapped them in the dry cloths from our emergency kit. Their eyes were half shut, their breathing shallow. I kept one hand on the motor, the other pressed gently against the kitten inside my jacket, feeling its faint heartbeat against my chest. It reminded me that not every rescue wears a uniform or speaks in words. Some just cry in the rain and hope someone hears. As we sped toward the clinic, the first sunlight of the day broke through the clouds, pale and hesitant, but enough to glimmer across the floodwater. I looked down at the two tiny shapes, barely alive, and whispered a promise neither of them could understand. "You're safe now. I've got you."
The veterinary clinic was one of the few places in the district still functioning that morning. Its lights glowed faintly through the gray mist like a beacon, reflected in the flooded street below. When we arrived, the staff were already working through exhaustion, rescuing animals, drying cages, sterilizing instruments by flashlight because the power had gone out. As we approached, a young nurse in soaked scrubs came rushing toward us. "What have you got?" "2 kittens," I said, my voice trembling more than I'd expected. They were floating in the floodwater. Cold, weak, I don't know how long. The woman's eyes softened instantly. She reached for them with the practiced gentleness of someone who has seen too much suffering and still chooses to care. "Inside, hurry," she urged. We followed her through the narrow hall. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and wet fur. In one corner, a dog barked softly from a kennel, and a cat with a bandaged leg blinked from atop a metal table. The scene felt both chaotic and sacred, a fragile place where life was still being defended. They placed the kittens under warm lamps, wrapping them in towels so small they looked like folded mittens. One of the veterinarians, Dr. Harris, checked their pulses and breathing with careful precision. He murmured, "They're hypothermic, but their hearts are still strong. That's something." Mark stood behind me, quiet. Neither of us spoke while they worked. The sound of the rain outside mixed with the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, a quiet battle being fought in miniature. I hadn't realized how much I was holding my breath until I heard the faintest mewl, a real, solid sound from the ginger kitten. It moved its paw weakly, as if reaching for something unseen. The doctor looked up and smiled faintly. "That's a good sign." I felt something inside me loosen, something that had been wound tight since the night began. Maybe hope, maybe exhaustion. I wasn't sure anymore. They told us we could leave, that the kittens were in good hands. But as I stood by the table watching those small, fragile creatures breathe, I couldn't make myself move. "Can I check on them later?" I asked. "Of course," the nurse replied kindly. "We'll keep you updated. If they make it through the night, they'll have a good chance." If they make it through the night. Those words stayed with me the whole day. We returned to base around noon, drenched and silent. Other teams were coming back too, some with survivors, some with stories that were harder to tell. The storm had subsided, but the damage was immense. Streets were gone, bridges broken, homes swept away. As I peeled off my wet jacket, I realized it still smelled faintly of the kittens, a mix of mud, rain, and something warm underneath. It's strange how even in disaster, life leaves traces of gentleness. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those two tiny faces again pressed against the towels. I'd seen so many rescues, so many tragedies, but for some reason, those kittens haunted me. Maybe it was because they had no one, no owner waiting, no home to return to, just the mercy of chance and two strangers in a boat. At dawn, I went back to the clinic. The air still smelled of rain, but the streets were calmer now. Mud clung to everything. When I entered, the same nurse recognized me instantly and smiled. "You're back early." "I couldn't stay away," I admitted. "Well, you might want to see this." She led me into the recovery room. The kittens were lying side by side in a small padded cage, wrapped in blankets. Their eyes were open, glassy, blinking, but alive. The ginger one was licking its paw clumsily. The gray one just stared at me, those tiny pupils wide and curious. Dr. Harris entered behind me holding a clipboard. "You came at the right time. They made it through the night." "Both of them?" "Both," he said, smiling. "They're fighters. We'll keep them here for a few weeks, feed them, vaccinate them, make sure they're stable. After that, we'll look for a home." A home. That word echoed in my mind. I leaned down and whispered softly through the cage bars. "You did good, little ones. You made it." The gray kitten tilted its head as if it recognized my voice. For a moment, the world outside, the wreckage, the storm, the endless calls for help all faded away. There was only warmth and the slow rhythm of two tiny hearts still beating. Over the next few weeks, I visited them whenever I could. Between rescue shifts, I'd stop by the clinic, sometimes bringing small cans of food, sometimes just sitting there quietly watching them grow stronger. The staff started calling them Stormy and Ash. It fit them perfectly. Stormy was the ginger one, loud, brave, always climbing on things he shouldn't. Ash was quieter, always trailing just behind, watching everything with cautious eyes. Each visit they greeted me with a little more energy, first with faint meows, then with paw taps through the cage bars. It was strange how quickly I grew attached. I told myself it was just because I'd found them, that it was part of the job, but deep down I knew it wasn't that simple. They'd survived something few do, and somehow that made them feel like a small piece of hope that I could hold on to. One evening I found a small card on the clinic's bulletin board. Adoption requests open. 2 kittens rescued during December flood, available soon. I stood staring at it longer than I should. Mark came in behind me, still in uniform, holding 2 coffees. "Thinking about adopting them?" "I don't know," I said, half smiling. "I don't even have time to feed myself, let alone 2 kittens." "Maybe they're exactly what you need," he said quietly. "A reminder that storms end." I didn't answer. But that night, as I lay in my small apartment listening to the wind outside, I realized he might be right. A month passed. The city was still recovering, rebuilding roads, clearing debris, helping families piece their lives back together. The flood had taken a lot, but it had also shown the best in people. Neighbors sharing food, strangers helping strangers, children painting thank you signs for rescue workers. Amid all that chaos, life had found a way to continue. Then one morning I got a call from the clinic. "Officer Miller," it was the nurse's voice, cheerful, "just wanted to let you know, both kittens have been adopted." For a second, I couldn't speak. Adopted? Yes, a young family, 2 kids, a big house outside the city. They came in this morning. The kids wouldn't stop smiling. Said they wanted to name them Ginger and Smoke. That's perfect," I said, my throat tight. She laughed softly. "We thought you'd like to know." When the call ended, I sat back in silence. Outside my window, sunlight broke through for the first time in days, spilling gold over the soaked streets. Somewhere out there, 2 kittens, once half drowned, now safe, were chasing toys in a warm living room, loved and cared for. And for the first time since that storm, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace.
It's been 3 months since that storm. Sometimes, when I walk through the rebuilt streets, I still expect to hear the sound of rushing water or the echo of emergency sirens. But the city has quieted now. Life has crept back in slowly, through laughter spilling from cafes, through lights glowing in windows again, through the simple rhythm of normal days returning. The flood changed many things. It took lives, homes, pieces of memories. but it also revealed something that we often forget, that fragility and strength can live in the same breath. That kindness is the one current we can still control when everything else has been swept away. I keep a small photograph on my desk now, taken by one of the clinic nurses. It's of two kittens, side by side, sitting on a soft blue blanket. One ginger, one gray. Their fur is clean, fluffy, their eyes bright and fearless. Beneath the picture, someone had written in small handwriting, "Rescued during the December flood, thriving today." Whenever I look at it, I remember the moment we first saw them. The cold, the silence, the way their cries cut through the sound of the storm. I remember their weight in my arms, so light it felt impossible that something so small could fight so hard to live. And I remember the way the sunlight broke through that morning, reflecting off the floodwater like a promise that things would get better. Maybe that's why I became a rescuer in the first place, not just to save lives, but to remind myself that even in the darkest nights, something worth saving always remains. A few weeks ago, the family who adopted them sent me a letter. It was handwritten, with two small paw prints drawn in the corner in bright red ink. "Dear Officer Miller, Ginger and Smoke are doing wonderfully. They've taken over our house, chasing toys, sleeping on our kids' beds, and stealing everyone's hearts. We can't imagine life without them now. Thank you for saving them when no one else could. Because of you, our family feels complete." I must have read that line 10 times before I could set the letter down. I'm not sure I deserve their thanks. The truth is, those kittens saved something in me too. During that storm, I'd seen so much destruction, so much despair, that I'd started to forget what hope looked like. But the moment those tiny paws clung to my glove, I remembered. Hope isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, trembling and barely breathing, but it's there, waiting for someone to notice. When I go out on rescues now, I carry that memory with me. Every cry in the dark, every outstretched hand, every life that seems too small to matter, I think of Ginger and Smoke. And I remind myself, every heartbeat is a victory. One evening, near the end of winter, I drove out to the countryside where the family lives. I hadn't planned on visiting, but something pulled me there. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure. The house sat at the edge of a quiet hill, surrounded by fields still damp from melted snow. When I stepped out of the car, I saw them. Two cats playing near the porch, chasing each other through the frost-covered grass. They'd grown so much. Ginger's coat glowed like fire in the pale light, and Smoke's gray fur shimmered like ash after rain. When they noticed me, they paused, staring with that same wide-eyed curiosity I remembered from the clinic. For a moment, I thought they might not recognize me. But then Smoke trotted closer, tail flicking high, and rubbed against my boot. "Hey, little one," I whispered, crouching down. "You remember, don't you?" Ginger joined, pressing against my knee, purring so loudly it almost drowned out the wind. Their warmth seeped through my gloves, the same warmth I'd once feared would fade. I stayed there for a while, not saying anything, just listening to the sound of their contentment. The children peeked from the window, waving, and their mother opened the door with a smile. "They like you," she said. "We've met before," I replied quietly. She must have seen something in my expression because her smile softened. "You gave them a second chance," she said. "They gave me one too." As I drove back toward the city, snow began to fall. Soft, slow, and harmless this time. No thunder, no flood, no fear. Just the gentle hush of winter settling over the earth. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't before. Saving lives isn't only about pulling someone from danger. Sometimes it's about witnessing the world heal in small, ordinary ways and allowing yourself to heal with it. If you ever find yourself standing in the middle of life's storm, tired, uncertain, ready to give up, remember this. Somewhere out there, a tiny heartbeat is still fighting. It may be hidden beneath the noise, it may be fragile, but it's there. And maybe it's waiting for you to listen. kindness doesn't always change the world in an instant, but it can change a moment. And sometimes that's enough to start everything over again. So the next time you hear a cry, however small, however faint, don't turn away. Because even in the darkest night, compassion is the light that never goes out. And sometimes that light meows.